come with me if you want to live. Remember that? That's my Arnold impression. Not very good. I realize. I apologize for that. Anyway, we're not talking about the Terminator today. We're talking about Jingle All The Way, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm joined by comedian and father of two, Tyler Champagne. Check him out on socials, linked in the show notes. This was a really fun episode to record. It gets a little vulgar at times if you're listening with kids, but there's actually some really interesting family lessons in this movie. So hope you enjoy. It was really funny. My name is Anthony Franzese. You're listening to the Successful Working Parents podcast, where normally we interview working parents, but we've been having some fun switching things up a little bit, talking about the parenting dynamics in movies. Hope you enjoy this one. I appreciate you listening. If you enjoy this episode, please follow and share with a friend. I really appreciate that. Anyway, on to the show. Welcome back to the Successful Working Parents podcast. Today, we are talking about the 1996 comedy hit, Jingle All The Way. My guest today is Tyler Champagne. Real name, my favorite name forever now. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Anthony. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, if you would give us a quick intro, please.
Yeah, so my name is Tyler Champagne. I'm from Toronto, Ontario. If you're from Toronto, I'm not actually from Toronto, but it's the easiest place to say that I'm from, that people will know. I am 32. I have two kids under the age of 3. I work full time, and my life is quite busy.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk about this movie. I hadn't seen it in a long time. When we were chatting about what movie to cover, you had suggested this. What is your relationship like with Jingle All The Way?
It's in the rotation of Christmas movies that my wife and I watch every year. I don't know if it's just my wife. I don't imagine that it is, but she gets into the Christmas rotation of movies and decor and crap all over the house like November 1st. So you need quite a catalog of movies to watch. So Jingle All The Way is always in there. Obviously, there's the Home Alones and stuff like that, and there's a classic rotation of old Christmas movies that we always watch, and Jingle All The Way is one of them. And we were talking about on a call before this. It's watching movies like this with the lens of being a parent now it makes you. Or even just as an adult as well. Like, sometimes you don't think of it, it's in the background, but watching it with the lens, through the lens of being a parent makes it come across very differently.
Totally. I hadn't seen this movie in years either. So it was really interesting to see that. So we'll definitely get into that. The one thing that's really funny about this movie is this is one of the few movies where Arnold was just like a regular dude. He's not an action star. He's not really even that tough of a guy. I had a hard time understanding, does everybody agree he's like a big, intimidating looking guy or not? Right. Like there's just no explanation for why this American man has this thick accent and is jacked out of his mind. So I was having a hard time reconciling that.
Yeah, it was just, there's, not to jump ahead, but there's, a scene at the end of the movie that's very Batman-esque, where Arnold's character is wearing like a tinted yellow visor as Turbo Man, and his family doesn't recognize him. And you're like, how many jacked 6'2" Austrian guys are in Minneapolis? Like,
yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on that final scene, but we'll get to that. But yeah, so we dive into the movie. Also, the son, played by Jake Lloyd, little Anakin Skywalker. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but he quit acting after he was Anakin, unfortunately. So it was nice to see him doing something else before that. But I think he was pretty heavily, allegedly bullied for his appearance as Anakin. So I'm sorry to hear that, but it was good to see him. Arnold is a mattress salesman, right, in this movie, and they kind of set this up. He's like just a working dad. Runs I guess, some kind of mattress salesman. And then they have this neighbor, Ted, who all the ladies seem to like. And the movie kicks off with Arnold being late for a karate belt ceremony.
Yeah. Sorry, before language, do you have any preference, or is it say?
Oh, yeah, please.
Please.
Let it fly, yeah.
Okay. All right. I always like to double check.
Yeah, no. So are your kids at the age where you're taking them to some of these, like, gymnastics classes and karate classes yet?
Not yet. So my son's just over 2.5, and my wife and I the other day actually were looking at, what do we put him in? And a martial art is something that we've discussed, as well as gymnastics, because it's he's super active. He's always trying to jump off stuff, the couch, chairs, the stairs. I mean, he's constantly just trying to end himself. It feels like. So we were talking about that, and then I happened to watch the movie a couple of days later, and almost the first scene is him showing up to this karate belt ceremony, and it was just like, oh, maybe maybe I will put him in that, but I will try not to be late to things like that.
Yeah, I mean, being late, I can relate to this from when I was a kid. Like when my parents were late to pick me up to stuff or late to be at things, I found it very, very traumatic. My dad was late to a baseball tryout when I was a kid, and I'm still kind of processing it in therapy. So I definitely get that. This guy seems to be like, again, I don't know what he's doing that's so important. Like just leave work a little bit earlier, but I guess he's trying to like squeeze in every ounce of mattress sale before he leaves.
Yeah, exactly. Like I got some notes here. So 2 minutes and 20 seconds in, I wanted to start crying because the kid goes, "Dad misses everything," and has like this completely innocent voice and you're like, "Oh my God!" And then you realize that the entire movie is just based on one like bad parenting decision by Arnold's character after another.
Yeah, and he's late. He misses it completely. He's not even late. He misses it. The
Yeah.
kid's so upset, and then he's just like, "Hey, like." He's basically trying to bribe him, right? He's like, "Let me make it up to you. Like, I'll get you something."
Yeah, he immediately goes with bribery.
Yeah, yeah. He doesn't even like offer like to do anything else special for him or like spend the day with him. He's just like, "Hey, like I'll get you something. What do you want?"
What's cool that I can buy you? And then that just sets off the entire movie, which is just a completely stressful disaster from start to finish, basically.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So of course he wants a Turbo Man doll. Um, he was supposed to get it weeks ago. He lies to his wife, said he got it. And now this is kind of we're just set up for the movie of it's Christmas Eve and he's got to find this friggin' Turbo Man doll, which is clearly going to be tricky. Do you remember like the Tickle Me Elmo craze many years ago? Like that was really what came to mind for me. I don't know what the hot toy is anymore, but I remember very clearly just like you could not get your hands on this thing.
Yeah, I remember Furbies were one.
Yeah.
Beyblades were another big one. And like the TY dolls. What were those little animals called? They had like
Beanie Babies.
Beanie Babies, yeah. Like that was a crazy one too, where there was limited edition ones that everybody wanted and stuff. So it's I mean the anxiety of trying to finish work. Like I immediately put myself in that position where like sometimes you do get stuck, right? And you're trying to like finish up one thing, and then it keeps escalating and it never, and then getting stuck in traffic, which is, I mean, when you're late for something and you hit traffic, there's nothing that makes like, I want to bite my steering wheel like a pretzel, like, I can separate when I'm in traffic and I'm not late for something. I just go, there's nothing I can do. Right. But when I'm trying to get somewhere, there's just, so that immediately watching this sent me into like a tailspin of like, I cannot deal with traffic when I'm already late for something.
Yeah, Cole, because he's repeating to himself that he can make it. So I guess he's on time if he can just not hit any traffic, and then of course he does. And so again, I as a punctual person, you got to bake in that 10-15 minute buffer. You got to be leaving work a little bit earlier.
Yeah,
for sure.
And then he tries to avoid the traffic by driving on the shoulder and gets pulled over by the cop, which he ends up having this days-long continuous run-in with.
Yeah, I thought the primary antagonist is Sinbad, and the secondary antagonist is this like cop who he just keeps like running into all day. Great to see Sinbad, by the way. I don't think he's doing well right now. I think he might be sick.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, but it was,
he's wild in this movie.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, I mean, he's essentially a terrorist. We'll get into that in a little bit, but he's committing acts of terror throughout this movie,
and no one cares.
No one cares. Correct. That's correct. Yeah. I did enjoy. He had like a little rant about capitalism when he was online. It was this. I feel like that's still a way that people feel. This is 30 years ago, and I just thought that was a relevant rant that
for
people
sure.
still feel.
And just knowing him, like I feel like that there's no way that was all scripted. I think it probably just had like literally. It said like rant about capital, or it said something, and then he just went because he's a comic and whatnot. So comics in general are difficult to work with as actors because they just want to do their own thing. And I just have a feeling that a lot of his moments in the movie were unscripted, and they're just like, all right, Sinbad's just going off, just keep rolling.
Yeah. Speaking of anxiety, like how much anxiety did just these crazy lines at the stores give you? I mean, I like the idea of going to a mall like that is so upsetting.
It sent me into such a tailspin because like, again, especially knowing that it was on Christmas Eve, like if it's earlier and and you can kind of, again, it's knowing that you're already late for something and then you run into these obstacles that just drives me nuts. That's
Mhm.
why it's like I do as much shopping online as I possibly could now.
Oh
But
yeah.
still, like you drive past the mall near Christmas and it's still like this. So it's not, people are still doing it.
Yeah.
And absolutely cannot deal with it.
Do you remember when you were a kid, like the the hubbub before Christmas and like trying to like find the right toys for you and all that stuff?
Oh yeah, and then they're always trying to make, like, I was always making backdoor deals with like my stepdad, which looking back on it is crazy to think about. But it'd be like, oh, I'd be like, I want this, and he'd be like, all right, I'll put that in your mom's ear and that type of stuff. But yeah, just wanting something and then just imagining it, like trying to manifest it almost, of like,
Mhm.
I'm definitely, I want this toy, and then you see them maybe under the tree or wrapped, or you're just trying to like do detective work around your house before this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I remember one time my dad, he doesn't listen to this, so he's not going to hear the story. But I wanted a GameCube, and he actually was doing something really cute, which was, I think he had one already, and he was like taking me to stores on Christmas Eve because it was fully sold out, and he was just like, he was like kind of playing it up like that it wasn't available anywhere. We went to like 4 or 5 stores, and then like
Oh,
one time the last store was like right before we were like going home for bed, like after dinner or something like that. He's like, all right, we'll try one more store, and they had it. And he was like, "Oh fuck!" And he just like, I was like, and then I knew like what he was doing, but I was like, man, that would have been a great surprise. But
that's like the opposite of Jingle All the Way. Like,
it literally is the opposite. Yeah, he was pulling a Jingle All the Way on me essentially.
yeah,
So I do appreciate that. I'll maybe try to bring some of those lessons to my parenting when my kid gets a little bit older. But Dad, yeah, if you ever listen to this, I do appreciate that you did that, even though it didn't work out.
yeah. One time,
Uh,
one time I got a hockey stick that I wanted, and it was wrapped, but like, come on now.
Wrap like a hockey stick, yeah,
Yeah, it's just a hockey stick in wrapping paper. I mean, it
yeah.
wasn't like in a box. It wasn't disguised as something else. It was in the corner behind the tree, wrapped. So it's just a hockey stick with wrapping paper. And I was like, but I really wanted it, so I was super psyched and knew immediately when it was there what it was.
Yeah. I mean, you
Obviously,
got to put that in something for sure.
yeah.
Now, I can appreciate this because I think you want to do whatever you can for your kids, right? You like as soon as you become a parent, you're just like I would do anything for this kid. So I get the idea of like I got to find this toy no matter what. So I do appreciate that. I feel like that was like fairly realistic.
Yeah.
Obviously, some of the hijinks maybe not, but I can appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that, would you essentially beat the shit out of a hardworking mailman in the streets of Minneapolis for your kid? Absolutely. I mean, I don't think any of us wouldn't. But yeah, I mean, they literally get the hijinks, as you refer to it, escalates to the point of domestic terrorism.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And again, like we said, no one cares. It doesn't seem to be that big of an issue. So there's like those moments of like, yes, you would do that, anything for your kid, and you can relate to that in the same second as like, oh, this guy just tried to blow up a police officer and no one gives a shit. Like,
Yeah, I mean, they don't show Sinbad's home life or like what his story with his kid is, but I guess he was busy being a madman, so we didn't have time to get a Turtle Man doll. But you got to wonder what's going on in his side of the household because he's got bombs, he's kidnapping people, he's tying them up, he's attacking children. It can't be.
he can't, he's divorced. He has to be, right? There's no way he lives. Like, his kid has 2 Christmases,
Oh
right?
yeah, I would assume so. Yeah, and probably the mom is doing better Christmases than he is, and he's like, this is my one shot to improve.
Yeah,
There's probably a stepdad involved that's doing a better job, right?
for sure. He's yeah, Sinbad has an apartment that just has like people's mail scattered all over, like stuff that he forgets. Because at one point in the movie, he's just tossing people's mail into the street. So he's
Yeah,
careless
right.
with, which I'm pretty sure is a crime to do that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, his apartment, yeah, it has like a one lawn chair in the middle of it.
Yeah, and the
And
mattress on the floor,
for
probably.
sure. I mean, his place must be a complete disaster. I wonder if there was ever any deleted scenes where it showed like what his like, but that he can't, with that attitude and the way he acts, he can't be still with his wife.
No, I agree with you 100% on that. And yeah, we're only left to imagine. Maybe we'll write some fan fiction about it. And so again, this is like Arnold was a big part of my childhood. Of course, I'm a huge Predator fan and Terminator. This is one of his few. I was trying to think of like other like times where he was just like a fun guy that wasn't an action star. Because even when he's in more of a comedic role, he's still like a badass dude, right? Like he's like the kindergarten cop, and less action hero. But yeah, what did you think about that?
Yeah, it was, again, like you said, it's just there's no real explanation of why this like 6'2" super jacked mattress salesman has like an Austrian accent. Like they breeze right over it, and they're
Yeah,
just like, yeah, he's just a dad, and you're like,
yeah,
oh, okay. And
yeah,
then, but like it's, at the he does have his kind of action hero moment though. Like he literally can't go a single movie without it,
right.
right? He
That's
has
true.
his moment at the end where, but again, he walks into that, wherever that is, like that warehouse,
Hmm.
and the people who are just assume that he is the person who's supposed to play Turbo Man. So like obviously people, there is this recognition that he is like this
He's
big
big. He's a big
jacked
guy. Yeah.
guy. He is a superhero looking guy.
Yeah, and there's times like he briefly intimidates some, like a couple of the guys in the mall, and he does beat up some fake Santas in another warehouse.
Several Santas, yeah.
Yeah, so there's definitely something there, but it's just, yeah, it's never clearly explained. I guess we're just to believe he's just like a fitter than usual dad, right? He's
Yeah.
not, he doesn't work out at all. He doesn't like track his macros at any point in this movie, so I don't know exactly what his deal is, but
Yeah. He's not
uh,
measuring protein or chicken breast at any point in the movie.
correct. Yeah, not a single protein shake is drunk in this movie, which is, I find a little bit hard to believe. Um, Now, at what point do you just convince your kid that the booster doll is just as fun as a turbo doll, and kind of drop it? I mean, we talked about we go to the ends of the earth for our kids, but eventually you got to be like, look, booster's pretty cool too, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think after your second fight with the police force,
Yeah,
I think you kind of give in and go, like, right before, between second fight of police force and domestic terrorism,
yeah,
you have to at some point in that gap be like, all right, this is not going to happen.
yeah,
Like I'm probably getting, written up on federal charges. I'm going to likely spend the rest of my son's childhood, if not longer, in federal prison. So
yeah,
I
correct.
think at some point before that, you go, yeah, this is not happening, and you try to explain your way out of it. Which
Yeah,
he's obviously bad at explaining things as a dad, because immediately, like we talked about, he goes into bribery like two and a
mhm,
half minutes into the movie.
that's true. Yeah, yeah, I would at least buy the booster doll like as a backup. Be like,
Yeah,
okay, if all else fails, I'll try to gussy this one up a little bit.
yeah,
But then there's a late shipment they find, of like one store has it, and this is also like pre-internet, or I guess pre, like, widespread internet and pre cell phone. So the fact that he just like hears somebody on the street mention it is obviously very lucky. But
yeah,
I think a lot of this movie could be solved with the internet and cell phones as well, right? As far as like finding one somewhere, calling stores before you go to them. Um, but he's right there. There's a mad dash to get to this store that has it. There's
yeah,
the raffle numbers on the little balls. The world's bounciest ball, right? It bounces like across the whole mall.
yeah. And there's a funny scene there where it's, he's chasing like a little girl at one point
Mhm.
through like this playground, and he
Yes.
chases her into a ball pit, and he's like, "Hi, little girl." And then like seven moms just beat the shit out of him with their purses and call him a pervert. I
Yeah.
quite enjoyed that moment, because that was a realistic one of like, oh, if that happened now, there would definitely that would happen today 100%.
Totally. Oh yeah. He would have been in big trouble for sure. I did appreciate that. And then yeah, we mentioned he kind of ends up meeting a sketchy Santa. They bring him to this warehouse, and he ends up beating the crap out of a bunch of them. Now, did you recognize the Big Show? The wrestler was
Yeah.
the really big Santa.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh, because I thought Arnold was taller, to be honest with you. I looked it up, and he's 6'2", which is my height, but I thought he was like way taller. I guess he has this, this like Mr. Olympia, this aura about him that he's like 6'4" or taller. But then you see him next to the Big Show, and you're like, oh, he's not actually.
Yeah, he's not like the Big Show's probably 7. I don't know if you looked his height up, but he's got to be in 7 feet.
Yeah,
He's wide though, right?
yeah,
Arnold's pretty wide, so I understand that. But yeah, so and again, we get to see a little bit of a badassness about him. So I guess he's just like a pretty fit guy that can handle himself. Like I don't think he had like a pass in the army, as most of his roles are, but
yeah,
he's able to beat up a bunch of Santas. And then the cops kind of show up and save him, because then they all dogpile on him, and the cops essentially like save his life by showing up.
yeah. Even though he's basically the one who started it, he somehow gets off scot free because they're in some weird like dark web, like back alley,
Yeah,
illegal like Christmas toy operation where they're
right.
employing a lot of little people. Let's say
Yeah,
that. I mean,
curious choice, but okay,
yeah, that's got to be a crime.
Yeah, so I think the cops are just busting up that ring, and
Yeah,
he happens to be getting beat up at the time, and they kind of bail him out.
yeah,
Um, Now we go back to the house, and one thing I want to call out was Ted's son is talk. First of all, Ted is like he's kind of like the town perv, I guess, but some ladies like him.
Ted can't stop trying to fuck everybody's wives. It's like
Yes,
it's unbelievable. He's like, "Hey Cindy, I got a reindeer," and just, like I mean, he's doing everything possible to bang everyone's wife in the entire neighborhood. And I don't think there's an explanation until way later that he's not married.
right. I
Right?
wrote that down early in my notes. I was like, is Ted single? It wasn't clear.
There's just
Um,
there's no mention until way later by the
yes.
parade that he's single.
So the son mentions they're talking about. The son says how much better his dad's been after they got divorced, like right in front of everybody. Because then he was saying like, oh, maybe Jamie, maybe your parents will get divorced. Like my dad's been so much better
Yeah,
after
yeah,
getting
yeah.
divorced. I thought that was a weird thing to say in front of everybody's listening and nobody like reacts to that. Like,
Yeah, and then Jamie runs away.
yeah, Darren runs away. He picks up the phone and Arnold really snaps at him kind of for no reason. And then he realizes he finally comes to terms. He's like, I'm actually a bad father, more than like being a not getting this doll. I'm just being a bad dad.
Yeah, because like he yells at his son on the phone from a payphone, by the way, which is hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
Just this extra element of like the '90s to me.
Yeah,
And his son's basically just like trying to hold him accountable,
yeah,
and he snaps at him, screams at him, like,
yeah.
and then I think later on, the kid like says something like, "Oh, we had a fight," as if like it was his fault at all.
Right,
Like
right.
he
Yeah,
tried to hold his dad accountable, got screamed at, then he kind of like snapped back, and then the kid still feels like it's his fault later on.
yeah. This guy's not really well prepared to be a dad. I think we can
No.
all agree. So now you're at the age, your older kid, you're probably starting to be able to like speak to them and like reason with them a little bit. So like, can you kind of relate to you do? I get it. You can't get frustrated with the way your kids are behaving and when they're not listening.
Yeah, it's there's especially my son's like not even 3 yet, so there's zero rationalization with him. Sometimes it's like a pick your battles type of moment,
Yeah,
but it's you try to explain calmly, and it's you can't, especially when they're toddlers, you can't yell at them because then you feel like you're permanently
yeah,
scarring them. Like this, our generation of dads and moms, it's you're trying to like undo the trauma that
hmm,
you received, which was it's just like a waterfall effect, right? They were trying to undo the trauma that they got, which was probably worse. So it's like this
yes,
trickle down effect.
yes,
And it's like, again, there's no reasoning with a toddler, but you just try to like calmly explain to them, and they're still just like, or they're wearing like a bucket on their head, or like their shoes are on the wrong feet, and you're trying to
yeah,
like explain to them like, hey, this is not the way we talk to people. Let's you try to like gentle parent them, which there's no gentle parenting in this movie.
yeah. No,
But it would be funny to see like 2024 version of this. Like it would be like you could do it in like a 5-minute sketch probably,
yeah,
because
oh
most
yeah.
of the problems could be solved by cell phones, just like Home Alone.
Hmm.
And then just like it'd be so funny to watch Arnold like try to gentle parent with his big dumb Austrian accent.
Yeah, and maybe just like explain how Daddy made a mistake. He didn't get the doll, and he's sorry.
Yeah,
You
just
know,
like
and
the whole movie is just him trying to lie his way out of his previous lie, and it's
yes,
just in the fact that like I'm sure we'll go over this, but the fact that at the end he still ends up being the hero, like that part pissed me off. Of like he somehow through all of this gets rewarded for being like this dad who lies constantly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's not, yeah. I guess he's not too repentant. He's like kind of like, hey, I know I took you guys for granted a little bit, but yeah, there's not really much of a fallout for
Yeah, he's
all of
just
this.
like, I love you, and
Yeah,
everyone's just like, oh, Turbo
yes,
Man's my dad. It's
yeah. Spot on impression, by the way. Okay, so then we get to this point where we've kind of hinted this before, but they're racing to the radio station. I guess they realize like, hey, like if you say all the reindeer in a row, you can get a Turbo Man doll. They race there. They realize it's not even a doll; it's a gift certificate for a doll. And this is when Sinbad, I guess, is familiar with the way mail looks and works, and he just thinks he knows which one is a bomb.
crazy. So yeah,
Yeah.
this is the second domestic terrorism moment of the movie, right? Because the first one with the cops, that was before this, right? Or was that after? Where
This
he's
is
like,
the This is the one, right?
Well, this is the okay, yeah. So, okay, first of all, if we could just back up for just 1 second,
Yeah, yeah,
a relatable parenting moment I found. First of all, they hear about the radio thing from a like a 100-year-old radio at a diner, and they're both drinking at a diner in the
yeah,
middle of the day. That to me was a relatable moment of just like you just need a second, and then Sinbad like offers him like
yeah.
whiskey or whatever to pour in his coffee, and he accepts it. That to me was just like, oh, we've had those moments where you just want to pour some booze in your coffee.
Hmm.
And then then we go into this whole thing where he just somehow says that like he has a bomb at the
Yeah, so
radio station.
he's had it the whole time, I guess, right? He's like, I know what are bombs, what aren't in packages. I guess that's the
Yeah,
rationale.
I
And then
guess.
yeah, but then he's wrong, right?
Yeah, it turns out to be like a little music box thing,
Yes, and then he gives the cops to take a different package, and that one was a bomb.
which is insane. So he was again running around with something he thought was a bomb that wasn't,
Yeah.
and one that he didn't think was a bomb that was
Yes.
the entire time, and like
Yes.
it didn't get set off, which
Right.
was again
And
insane.
then he lets the cops open it, and just kind of when he hears a huge explosion and just keeps running.
Yeah.
The cops
Again,
also fine.
there's basically zero consequence. He burned his hands a little,
Right.
It's like
Oh, that's right.
it's
That's
kind
right.
of like the barbecue flared up a little. That was the extent of the bomb.
Yeah. Meanwhile, there was clearly like a huge percussive sound, and like
It almost like blew out windows on like the 6th floor of like an
right.
office building. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah. So they kind of escape that scene. Arnold's car is towed. He gets home. Wouldn't you know it? Slippery little Ted is putting the star on his tree.
Oh, and putting the star on his tree is a euphemism for what Ted's actually trying to do.
Yeah. Now, and I'm not really a jealous guy, but I would react to this. I feel
Yeah.
like I think it's
But like again, Arnold is pissed off. He's mad at Ted the entire time for like being in his house, but he's also not there.
right.
So like,
No,
yes,
Ted, I mean, look, he's seeing an opportunity, right? He's taking a shot. Like he sees the opening. He's going for it.
jumping in the grave that's not even fully dug yet. I mean, he's eating cookies and he's like answering his phone and he's like,
I
"Yeah,
know.
your wife's in the shower. You want me to go tell her?" And he's like, "No." It's
I
like
know. Yeah. So aggressive by
Ted the
Ted.
perv.
Yeah.
I hate and I love Ted the perv at the same time.
I mean, look, you got to respect the game he's trying to play, right? I mean, he sees his openings, he's going for it, but I certainly wouldn't want him around my wife.
Yeah, Ted. Yeah, trying to bang someone's wife on Christmas Eve is a wild move.
That's a good point. I hadn't considered that. Yeah. And then he, by the way, we have to quickly mention, rest in peace to Phil Hartman. I didn't know this, but that actor was shot by his wife. Did you know that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was unfortunate research I was doing for this movie, and that was one piece of it I didn't realize.
I think it was a gun that was loaded with blanks too, if I'm not mistaken, and it was still a blank that I believe.
Really?
Something like that. There's some comedian from that era that it was shot with a blank and it ended up killing him. I don't know if it was Fireman. It may have been. I'm not sure. We have to fact check that.
Yeah, I'll have to fact check that, and we'll loop it in depending on the details. Yeah, so the wife finally realizes Arnold lied the whole time. He never got the gift. She's understandably disgusted with him. I appreciate Ted saying you can't bench press your way out of this one. Because now we're starting to understand, okay, this guy does in some way. We're acknowledging he's pretty big. He's obviously hitting the gym in some aspect.
Yeah.
That was the first time we really get to understand that people agree he's big.
Yeah, that was such a hilarious burn. And that was something that like is even more prevalent today because people are so obsessed with like physique and, fitness influencers and all that stuff. Just like telling someone when you've spent like the last 2 days at his house with his wife being like, you can't be strong and get out of this was a hilarious roast, even though Ted's a real creep and he's a problem. That was a good one.
Yeah, I agree. But he's at this point in his mind, he must be like, I'm so close to banging this wife. Like,
yeah.
He must have been like that crushed.
Yeah.
So we go to the parade, and then finally, thankfully, Ted does get denied pretty aggressively by the wife. So that was
before that though, they let their kids out in the streets of Minneapolis to go just like maybe meet up with people, which as a parent, right, I had that panic moment of like, you're just letting your kids walk around a parade. Like,
yeah,
that to me was a very quick moment. But again, that's that's something I wouldn't have picked up on before having kids. But I was like, oh, you just let your kids out in the streets with tens of thousands of people unsupervised. And then yeah, Ted takes his opportunity to try to go for it and gets flat out denied,
Yeah.
slammed.
Yeah. Well, that's something that you saw in the 90s more. Like, I think that's kind of how we grew up too, like having a little bit more like free reign
Oh
of
yeah, I got
of your
left.
life.
I got left in my stepdad's truck while he went grocery shopping for like hours.
We can unpack that another time, but yeah, that's the kind of stuff that
Yeah, that may be a deeper issue.
you know what I mean. I was referring to more being left home alone and things like that, but the truck too, it
Yeah,
happens. Um, yeah, so he also Arnold did like deck the shit out of a reindeer also right before that, like he just punches reindeer in the face.
yeah. Which again, another crime to add to
Yeah,
the list of just
yeah,
an unbelievable list of felonies that take place in
yes,
this movie.
yes. So at the parade, you hinted this before, but he kind of becomes a hero, but he also like stumbled into becoming Turbo Man, right? Like,
Completely by accident. Yeah,
yeah, he I guess he's going to the parade just to be like, hey, I promised I'd go to the parade. Like, I'm already not getting the doll. I'm just gonna go to the parade, right? I think that was his initial intention.
yeah. The whole thing is just happenstance that he just walks into that room because he's running away. Is he running away from the cop again, or is he
Running
running
from
away
that
from
same
somebody?
cop.
Yeah,
Oh, he's running from
so
the
he's
cop.
running away
Yeah,
from that cop, and yeah, he just happens to run into the room, and they're like, "Oh, the guy who's playing Turbo Man is here." And
yeah.
yeah,
This is like a classic movie trope of like, yeah, hey, come on, like no time to talk. Like it's time to go, right? Like they just assuming he's the guy when he's not. Like
yeah,
they did that in Forrest
no
Gump when he makes that
explanation.
speech. Yeah,
And
yeah, he's not
you
like
keep the whole time you keep waiting for like the real guy who was supposed to show up to like make an appearance and cause
right.
something, but it just never
Yeah,
happens.
yeah, and again, it's like he could just be like, hey, you got the wrong guy. He obviously has the agency to speak, and he never explains himself.
Yeah,
So this whole ending scene is pretty nuts, right? We get he's dressed as Turbo Man. Again, as you mentioned, he doesn't recognize his voice. His son doesn't recognize his own father. He's this giant Austrian man, doesn't recognize it. Sinbad then ties up a dude,
yeah.
like
So
fully, like
basically, I guess kidnap. I don't even know what that would be called. It's kind of like kidnapping light. I don't know. Second degree
you
kidnapping.
certainly can't do it, right? We could agree. It's definitely whatever it is. It's definitely illegal to do.
Yeah, and he was
I
on
don't know.
top of a building too. So like the guy's tied up at like the top of a 4 to 5 story building from where he
Right.
zip lines down from.
And this is to get a toy. He's gonna get that toy somehow that Arnold's giving away to a kid.
Yeah,
Jamie then runs away when he kind of attacks, and he run like. Why does he climb the building? Like, did the kid run to your mom or like run to anybody? He just runs kind of like away.
yeah. Run to your mom. Run to the cop. Run to
Yeah,
anybody. And his immediate first instinct is to like scale a sketchy ladder on the side of a tall building.
yeah. Weird instincts. Then we have a fully functioning jetpack.
Again, no explanation.
Way ahead of his time.
Way ahead of his time. And just, I mean, people who I don't know anything about physics, and that scene pissed me off. Again, you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, but he's just like flying around, and then the part where he just goes horizontally into a building,
Yes.
head first.
Yep. The family's praying over this huge feast during the parade. Also,
yeah, he goes. Yeah, they're having a massive
dinner, like
dinner at I don't know 1 p.m.
Yeah, like a Christmas ham or something.
Yeah, and he fully flies through the building. Like, I mean, the physics. Fast and Furious borrowed, I think, a lot of their physics from this movie.
That's a good point. Yeah, this is like a really
crashes through both windows, flies over, and goes out the other side. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's like before this, the movie's somewhat believable. It's just a guy trying to find a toy, and the hijinks that ensue. And then there's like, no, we have fully functioning jetpacks. We have a turbo rang, a boomerang that really defies physics as well. The way it like flies away and turns around
straight back. Yeah, he's shooting things out of his hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then as you mentioned, even the wife, he saves the day. Even the wife doesn't really recognize him at first.
I think they were like, wait a second. There's a moment probably when they were making the movie where they're like, hang on a second. It's not going to be believable that they don't recognize him. So they did that thing where like the mic changes your voice. Mm-hmm. That was, I think, a sad attempt at like, oh, that'll make it seem, which you're 2 feet from him.
Yeah.
He's your dad.
Yeah.
Even if he's speaking through the speakers, which are where exactly? No explanation of where the speakers are that he's talking to this little mic. You're going to hear his actual voice before what comes out of the speakers, right?
Right.
It felt like a very lame attempt at like, Oh well, the voice changes to sound like Turbo Man through the
Yeah.
speakers, so they won't recognize that it's Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right. And then the wife like has like a little bit of a look like, huh, who is this guy? And then when he reveals himself, he's like, oh, it's you. It's like, who else did you think it could have been?
Yeah, well,
Obviously, it's him.
it's yeah. What other 6'2" Austrian guy in Minneapolis looks exactly like your husband?
Yeah. And then the end, a very touching moment. I thought he's kind of saying, "Hey, I didn't realize how important you guys were, and I'm gonna show you now how much you mean to me." And I think that was a nice little.
Yeah, and then his dumbass son hands the Turbo Man to a guy who's going to federal prison.
Well, that's the thing. They don't like. He's. I don't know how he's gonna get that toy to his son. Right?
Yeah.
He's just like, "Oh, my, thank you so much." Like, you're not seeing your kid. Like, any possessions you have are gonna be taken from you.
Yeah, he's going to be in the handcuffs where the feet and the wrists are like chained together
like
with the chain.
like a Hannibal Lecter like mask style.
Yeah,
Like,
and how are you going to get that? And then he's like, yeah, the kid, there's like, oh, I don't need the Turbo Man. My dad's Turbo Man. He has to give the suit back.
right? Yeah,
He essentially stole it. He's not the guy. There's some guy who's fit up in the fourth story of that building who's like, what's going on? I'm the Turbo Man. So he has to give the suit back.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, it's. I would have kept the toy. I mean, if I was Arnold, I would have been like, "Hey, I don't think this guy deserves it."
Yeah, I would have been like, "Do you know what I went through?"
Not only what I went through, but this man is evil and tried to really hurt you.
Yeah,
so
and a lot of other people.
Yeah, and he didn't have a redemptive arc, so I don't think he deserved like any sort of a what, you deserve the toy after all.
Yeah, there was no moment or second of redemption from Sinbad's character where he had any sympathy. It was just like he just tried to beat the crap out of this kid for a toy. At the end, he ends up fighting with Arnold's son for several minutes and almost kills him when that like Christmas tree falls down.
Yeah, he put his son at serious risk of injury and death. For sure.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on like the kind of touching moment at the end between Arnold and his family?
It felt a little ham-handed, obviously, but like, it's. I don't think there was. I think they made another one. Obviously, was the second one with Larry the Cable Guy?
It was. I saw that on Wikipedia.
When I was looking this up, I was like, "What the hell?" But yeah, it's they had to finish with this with a touching moment. Obviously, you can't just have it end there. And it was tried to be as genuine as Arnold can be when he was. It was very obvious that the entire movie and probably the whole life, because again, first scene in the movie. He goes, what does he say? He says, Dad always lies, or Dad misses everything. So like, I guess it feels like just another lie.
Right. Yeah.
A little bit.
Are we sure he's really going to change? We don't really get to see that part.
Yeah. And he faces zero consequences.
Agreed.
I mean, Sinbad gets arrested, but like he was there for all of the fighting the cops and all that stuff. He somehow like skates under the radar of responsibility and blame for all of the felonies that were committed throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, he should have already been in trouble for the bomb thing, but I guess I don't know if they identified it as him.
Yeah, like he vandalized that the cop's bike.
Oh, right.
Then he was fighting all the Santas, and he happened to be getting dogpiled when the cops raided it, so he escaped there. Then he was at the radio station with the bomb, got out of the. I mean, he's running away from the scene of a domestic terrorist act. And again, he somehow just skates through this responsibility the entire movie, and then has this like kind of touching moment, and then everything's fine.
Yeah. All right. A few questions for you. So what do you think has aged poorly since 1996?
Aged poorly. I have some notes here. So yeah, it was mostly, the carolers thing made me laugh. 'Cause like, I don't know if that still happens in like small towns. I live in kind of like a small, nice neighborhood where people are friendly. If a group of people, dressed like that ever came to my house and started singing, I would call the cops. Right? That's something that I feel like that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
anymore.
You don't see that. Yeah.
Again, all the crimes that they commit is true. I mean, it's astounding. It's there's this thing of like it'd be because I know people did. Like with Home Alone, they calculated like the amount of damage or something that was caused, or like how long he would have spent for each crime. It would have been. I think someone should do that for this movie too, of like what the sentence would be for Sinbad, or like in total, if you added up all the stuff he committed during the movie. I think that would be quite hilarious.
Yeah, multiple life sentences for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that age well, right? There's I thought there was very few things that aged poorly, other than like obviously just dated things in the movie, like the
Yeah,
cars and the tech and all that stuff. But like people being crazy about malls, the stress of Christmas, the you'll do anything for your kids, all that stuff kind of is just that doesn't really change.
I agree. Yeah, 100%. I mean, other than like just that, a lot of this is solved with internet and cell phone. I think you're right. Like I think the movie really holds up pretty well. From a like, I would do this too if my kid really wanted something, and I just had a day to find it. Right, you would just spend all day trying to find it.
Yeah.
So I did appreciate that. What do you think are some of the best and worst parenting moment?
So I mean, basically, like I said, the entire movie is like this bad parenting moment where it's one lie and then one lie and then one lie. It's like it felt like so many times he could have just gotten out of it by being like, "Look, here's the truth, and I'm sorry." Right?
Right. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. When he yells at his son on the payphone and just like his son's just like trying to hold him accountable
I know.
for being like a shit dad, and he screams at him. That was obviously not a great parenting moment. Yeah, and then again at the end there's kind of that sweet moment, but like I guess the whole point of the thing is like, look how far parents will go to do whatever they want, and they just take it to the extremes for you know dramatic effect.
Yeah, I mean, other than like the final scene where he, kind of atones a little bit, what he's doing is nice, and that he's trying to do anything he can to find this toy. But it's also bad parenting throughout that action because he is lying. He didn't do it earlier. Like he's trying to like kind of bail himself out.
Yeah,
So it's not just like this like altruistic like good thing he's doing. It also would have been solved that he had done it 3 weeks ago when he was supposed to.
yeah, and then he lies to his wife, and she still
That's right.
has his back throughout the whole thing. Like, there's never a moment where she like considers that maybe Ted the perv
Maybe Ted's
and
the
his
one.
reindeer are gonna live in my house now. Like,
Yeah,
she never falters once,
I know.
even
I know.
though he's like a shit husband and dad the entire movie.
Yeah. I think most realistic for me, I think it is just like the idea of what you would do for your kids.
Yeah, and they basically say you guys would commit terrorism, right? Like, that's sort of
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
entire
Yeah.
point of the movie is like, you'd go this far, right?
Yeah. There's nothing you won't do, including detonating bombs and kidnapping kids and tying people up.
Yeah.
Any other like plot holes or nitpicks or things that we didn't talk about?
Honestly, plot holes I'm terrible at picking up on. I don't know if you had any. I'm sure that like the IMDb of this would have a long list of things, but other than the physics at the end being terrible. But like we said, up until that parade scene, there's nothing really, at least physically or conceptually, unrealistic about the movie. Right? It's not like there's
Yeah.
this. He's not. It's not like he's Turbo Man the entire movie. The jetpack thing is insane, and then somehow this suit is shooting things out, and then there's just someone yelling instructions at him, and it just happens to like the jetpack things. They just happen to come out of the wrist.
Yeah. I thought, yeah, the way the turbine suit works obviously doesn't really make sense. I think, other than just why Arnold is Austrian and jacked with no explanation, I think is one question mark.
Yeah.
Also, like the timing that he spends, it all takes place on Christmas Eve, so he spends what I assume is a pretty long day trying to find this toy. But then the parade is also like can't be that late. So I
Yeah.
don't.
So did all of this happen between like the morning and like 1 p.m.? Like,
It
that's
had to have. Yeah, it had
because
to have.
yeah. So the karate thing must have been on like the 23rd, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So yeah, this all happens in less than 24 hours.
Yeah. So he spends hours like driving to multiple places, going to the mall, fighting the Santas, going to the DJ
And
situation,
and
and
then
then it's parade time.
yeah, and then I mean, I know that, parts of Minnesota have very similar to Canada weather. Christmas Eve in the 90s, there would have been 3 feet of snow in that
Also,
city, would be my
uh,
guess.
yeah, good point as well. I agree. Final thoughts on the movie.
It was very interesting to watch it through, through the lens of parenting, which is kind of the point of what you're doing. It was cool. It made me, there's every time I've become so sensitive now, it feels like, and so buttery soft when it comes to watching TV or movies or anything with kids in it, because you immediately put yourself in those situations, right? You're like, oh,
Mhm.
like just the stress of being like, well, I lied once and now I have to keep lying to get out of it. Like, what do I do? What's the right thing to do? Because the last thing you want to do is disappoint your kids or let them down, right? Because we've all been in that situation as kids, right? There's that moment where they're at the diner and Sinbad's talking about how his dad like disappointed him and didn't get him that thing with the 7 guns or whatever it is when he was a kid.
Yeah.
And then Arnold envisions that Sinbad is a grown-up version of his kid. And that's when he kind of has this. It was a weird moment, I thought, of like he has this epiphany of like, oh, my kid's going to end up like Sinbad. My kid's going to be a mailman terrorist if I don't get this doll.
Yeah.
Because that's like kind of a key moment in the movie, right? Where like
it's certainly something you hope never happens to your kids, right? We all hope we raise kids not to become
mailman terrorists. I mean, the goal, mailman terrorists gotta be near the bottom of like what you would strive for your kids to be, right?
Yeah,
like right above serial killer, probably. But I thought was a kind of a funny, weird moment of just like he's like, oh no, my kid's gonna end up like Sinbad if I don't get this goddamn doll,
right? Yeah, I mean, I think it was a good cautionary tale on like being there for your kids and showing up, because he wanted that more than the Turbo Man, right? If he had just gone to karate, he wouldn't have needed to even do all of this. So
none of this would have happened if he had just left the mattress place on time.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
And I feel like there was a lot of movies like that in the 90s. Like Liar Liar was one too, where
I just want you to tell the truth.
In the title, he's never there. He's late. And again, he just has to lie and lie and lie his way out of the situation he's gotten in. I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but it was like a common theme, I feel like, in the 90s for movies of just like the parents not being there. And then that was, one thing I like, you want to promise to yourself when you become a parent. You're like, I'm never going to be the Jim Carrey character. I'm never going to be the Arnold character where I promise to be there for something and then I'm not. Right. Because and then you see videos online of like, now there's this, I don't know if it's a trend or whatever you call it, but it's just like the importance of showing up, and it's someone filming like a recital or something like that. And the kids see their parents and they light up and you're like, God, that's how important it is. Whereas all the movies in the 90s were the opposite. It was like, look what happens when you don't show up.
Yeah.
Terrorism happens.
The empty seat at the recital. I mean, they had that scene in this movie, right? In the beginning, he looks up, doesn't see his dad.
Yeah, and Ted's immediately trying to bang everyone's wife at the recital. Immediately. He's got the camera out, and he doesn't use that camera just for filming recitals. And
I think other than letting your kids down, it's a cautionary tale around not letting someone like Ted sneak into your marriage.
Yeah, exactly. And, he came with the ammunition, though. He got a reindeer somehow. Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, that we didn't really talk about that much, but that's a huge.
That's a bit of a plot hole.
That's like the early peacocking, right? Like you could get like a fast car, or you get a reindeer. I feel like that's another way.
On Christmas Eve, he comes with a reindeer. He's outside and he's just yapping, and you're just like, God, this guy's he's so horny.
Yeah, classic Ted. All right, Tyler. Well, this has been a lot of fun, man. Where can people go to connect with you or learn more about you? Anything you want to share or promote?
Yeah, so on Instagram at heated_seats, on TikTok, Champagne Tyler, on Cameo at Champagne Tyler. I do custom videos for money, nothing with my feet, despite some of the requests I've gotten. Champagne Tyler on YouTube, and then you can find my podcast, the Thick Dad Podcast, on iTunes, Spotify, and full video episodes on YouTube as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll link to all that in the show notes. Tyler Champagne, everybody. Tyler, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. This is a lot of fun.